Hello guys, let's talk football. Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you guys had a very great weekend. Of course, regardless of where you're watching from, I hope you enjoyed your weekend and of course that the new week is off to a good start for you. Well, I know that for Manchester United fans globally, it was another very disappointing weekend. I mean, this has almost become like a culture. So it's either they win this week and then next week they lose or they draw. So there's been that lack of consistency for a while now, and it's really disappointing. I mean, week in, week out, um, supporters of the club go back home and then they're not happy, and then they can't even watch replays during the week. So I feel like at this point, I am one of the supporters who's to some extent believe um, that Reuben Amorim truly wants to get sacked, like he wants to leave the club. But then, for some reasons, the management of the club are not letting him go. There have been quite a lot of discussions around the fact that okay, he's deliberately not trying to succeed at the club because he wants the management to sack him so that they can give him. I think the part of the contract is that he's going to be paid a compensation of around, I think, 12 million pounds or thereabouts. That's if he goes when it's not yet his time to leave the club. And I feel like that's why the management is not letting him go yet, because you can't tell me that they're keeping faith with him, looking at the fact that week in, week out, performances do not change. All right. But it's really disappointing because come on, since the season started, these are uh, 6 matches so far, and then how many has the club won? About just two. It's really disappointing, just to say the least. Like I said, I mean, these days, I know that many fans of the club really want to change, their club, but for some weird reasons, there's this natural liking that comes, sort of connects, Manchester United fans all over the world. So even when the club is messing up, even when the club is not living up to expectation, you still find out that their supporters rather are not, they're not giving up hope. But I mean, it can be really tiring. It can be really tiring. Just look at what Arsenal played yesterday against Newcastle. Just in about the last minute of the game, and then they got the second goal, to grab that 2-1 win over Newcastle. We saw how very hot that game was. Of course, Newcastle led in the first half of the match, and then it was looking like they were already going to snatch the victory. And then before you knew what was happening, Arsenal got back into the game. It was 1-1, and then before you knew what was happening, in almost the last minute of the game, they got a second goal. And that really shows you a club that is committed to winning. And this is one thing for a very long time I've not really seen in Manchester United. Why, right? So it's, I don't know, the players themselves have become um, too lazy, too relaxed. I don't really know what's happening. It appears as though they are already, or they have given up on Reuben Amorim, and of course that can explain why they are not really putting in efforts. The defensive line is not good. We're still struggling clearly with goalkeeper. And then talking about the goalkeeper position, I'm still wondering why Reuben Amorim is yet to begin the new goalkeeper that they got. I mean, why sign a new player and then you don't want to play him? You don't want to feature him? It really doesn't make sense. It really, I mean, he doesn't have any explanation for that. You cannot spend so much money on a player and then you bring him into the club, and then to feature him in the game becomes a problem. It was the same thing he did against to Shesko, and then I can tell that sort of really dampened his spirit. I know that a couple of matches, I think about 2 or 3, he was always bringing him in the 70 to 80th minute, and then when the guy gets into the pitch, you can tell really clearly that he's not really committed because of the time he was brought in. I mean, he really needs to change, and that's talking about Reuben Amorim. He really needs to change this whole idea of bringing in the player and then letting him sit on the beach, because that doesn't make sense. All right. Talking about the system, of course, I know that in my last video I spoke largely about the fact that, of course, he said that not even the Pope can make him change his system. And personally, and this is my personal opinion now, I don't think that that is what a mature coach should do. All right. So it's okay for you to stick to a system if it is giving you the victory that you want. All right. I have not seen any coach who is sticking to a system that is making him fail, and that is what Reuben Amorim is doing. And this is part of what is fueling, the perception or the belief in many quarters that he really wants to get sacked, from the club. Because I see no reason. You can't explain to me that you are committed to a project in a club and then you're playing a system that is clearly not working, and then you're still deciding to stick to the system, and you're even saying that nobody can make you change the system. That doesn't really make sense to me. It doesn't really make sense to me, and I believe that it doesn't also make sense to many fans across the globe. At this point, I really don't know. I think I hear that the management wants to give him till November. I think that's when it will be, I don't know, maybe exactly about 1 year or so, and then they would let him go. All right. Let's just see what happens, because it doesn't look like anything will change. It doesn't look like anything will change. I mean, in the first 6 games of the season, they've consistently maintained the same pattern, and it's not really giving us results. All right. I know that, of course, we can't entirely blame the coach, because one thing I've always said is that if, as players, you discover that your coach is not committed to the project, fine, it doesn't even make sense. So why would you bring a coach who is not committed to a project into a club? But if that's the case, I mean, it's now up to you, the players, to really prove him wrong, right? But in Manchester United, we're not seeing that, and of course, because of that, everybody's heaping the blames on the coach. The players themselves have not shown enough commitment. So if this coach is saying, this is the system I want to play, and then oftentimes we've seen him play players out of their positions, all right? Of course, which doesn't also make sense, because there's nothing that beats you really letting players to maintain their positions, because that sort of makes them, bring in their A game. You can tell that they are really playing in their natural positions. But that's something else that we've not seen in Manchester United, and I feel like it's to a very large extent what is also affecting, the style of play. But like I said, I mean, the players can decide to just be committed to the game. At least win games and save your head, while you constantly try to pressure the coach into sort of sticking to a system that is really working. So talking about the match against Brentford, of course, on Saturday, which sadly ended 3-1, in favor of Brentford. It was another very disappointing match. I mean, I watched it from the very beginning to the end, but at some point I completely lost interest. In fact, I even had to change the channel into something else, because what I expected wasn't what I saw. All right. So performance-wise, they were abysmally poor, very, very poor. And then I feel like these days, almost every club, I mean, even those at the bottom three, feel like they can come to, or they can play against Manchester United and grab a win. And it's really bad. If clubs are having that mentality against you, it's really bad. I mean, for me, it shows a very huge sign of failure. I mean, clubs like that, can't really have that kind of mentality against a club like Arsenal, because that day in, week out, Arsenal is really committed to the project. But in Manchester United, we don't see that, and it's really sad. All right. So from the very first minute, at some point, it was as though Manchester United were trying to press, But then, of course, it was Brentford were the first to get the goal. They got the first goal, courtesy of their striker. They got the second goal, courtesy of the same striker. Clearly, you could see the extent of, I don't even know, how to describe it. We have a set of defenders, I'm sorry to say this, who are sometimes appear not to be coordinated. I mean, sometimes they appear to lose focus, and that is one thing I've constantly, complained. Which is also why Reuben Amorim shouldn't be playing a back three. You are playing a back three in a club where there are no defenders who are very sharp, defenders who can go against the striker one-on-one and actually win the ball. Because we saw that the first goal, the second goal, clearly, goals that if we had strong defenders there, it would have really helped defend. And of course, the third goal, that was clearly the fault of the goalkeeper. I wonder where he was going to. That if he was a goalkeeper like who was this guy in Arsenal, I mean, he would have kept that goal out. All right. So Manchester United really has. I mean, the problem is too much. I don't even know where to begin. In the goalkeeper position, we'll have an issue. The defensive line, we have an issue. In the midfield line, of course, we saw, that he also started Ugarte again, which is another decision that has really raised eyebrows. I mean, why do you keep keeping Kobe Mino on the bench when he's fit to play? I mean, this is one question that Reuben Amorim has not really answered. I wonder why you're keeping such a bright future, who is really fit to play, and then you're keeping him in the bench. That doesn't make sense. So we saw that in that game. Of course, we saw some lapses. You're playing Fernandez um, behind when he should. He's a forward-looking player who should play, 8-10 or so. But you're playing him deeper. That's also playing, players outside of their natural positions, and that doesn't make sense. I mean, personally, I've never really trusted Ugarte to be in charge of that defensive midfielder, defensive midfield position rather. I keep wondering why Amorim keeps, featuring him. You can't really tell me that Kobe Mino is inexperienced. This is someone who we watched 2 seasons ago, and we saw how he could really be in control of the midfield. He's even good with recovering. Fine, it's okay to argue that sometimes he can be lazy, but I mean, there's really no way you can compare him and then Ugarte in that midfield position. He's clearly better. All right. So, but I keep wondering why the coach keeps, keeping him out and then bringing him in 70 and 80 minutes. See, that doesn't make sense. That sort of weakens whoever it is that you're bringing in that minute, and then he sees that he only has about 10-15 minutes to play. There's something it does to the psyche. It sort of makes you feel like, am I really wanted in this club? And it doesn't make sense, especially when someone is fit, when someone clearly has shown, even on the training ground, that okay, I am fit and I'm better off in this position. All right. So these are some of the issues that keep pointing to the fact that okay, this man, it looks like he really doesn't mean well for the club. By the way, I mean, this is a club that has spent over 200 million pounds. Bringing in very, very interesting players who can score the goals. All right, and then at this point, we're not still seeing signs that it looks like they are going to finish, in the top 4 and the top 7 this season. We're not seeing the signs yet. All right, okay. So thankfully, Shesko got his first goal of the season. Hopefully, that's the first of many to come. It was a very controversial circumstance, but thankfully, the ref actually let go of the goal, and then so that would sort of do his confidence whole world of good. So let's see what happens. But clearly, I do not see Reuben Amorim retaining his position by December. I do not see him retaining the position, and there have been a lot of questions around. So if he leaves, who would take the reins of power? I mean, personally, I would suggest Zinedine Zidane. I know that Manchester United has made several moves. At some point, it was rumored that okay, he didn't want to coach the club, and then at some point, it was rumored that the management didn't really push for him to come to the club. There are also quite a number of names who are likely going to be considered. So you have Pochettino, former coach of PSG and Tottenham. All right. So you have former coach of England. He's also been, that's talking about Graham Potter. He's also been considered for the job. Well, whoever it is, I just hope that the club would really, that's talking about the management. Now, I just hope that they would really make a very quick decision before things really get out of hand, because week in, week out, Manchester United keeps slipping into the relegation zone. I mean, it's crazy. We saw where they finished last season, I think about 15th or 12th or thereabout. We don't want a repeat of that this season. Now, moving over to other matches that were played during the weekend. Of course, we saw that late drama between Crystal Palace and Liverpool. I mean, it really shows what you can achieve when you are determined to really achieve something. All right, because it was another game I really calmed down to watch, because I saw how they started and how Crystal Palace kept on pressing Liverpool. I mean, from every angle. I can't count how many chances that Crystal Palace missed. All right, so it really shows what you can achieve when you're committed. Of course, they were the first to get a goal. but courtesy of Sa. And then of course Liverpool got back into the game. And then I think about in the last minute, 80th minute or thereabout, Crystal Palace scored again to make it 2-1, and then it was crazy, like it was massive. Yeah, and it was also a well-deserved victory. So that leaves Liverpool, of course, still at the top of the table, but with 2 points, only 2 points ahead of Arsenal. So they are at 15, while Arsenal is currently at 13. After that late dramatic win against Newcastle in another very tough encounter of the week. Of course, Manchester City got up, I think about it was 5-0 or 5-1 or thereabout. To also keep their season really strong in the Premier League. Chelsea were defeated, I think it was 3-1. So Chelsea, Manchester United were the biggest losers of the weekend. I know there are also rumors about what's really happening at Chelsea. The fact that so they lost against Manchester United, and now they've also lost against. I think it was. I'm trying to remember the club they played against. But whatever happens, they are a better side compared to Manchester United because they are currently at 8 points. Manchester United is at 7 points. But of course, we're into a new week. We just wait and see what happens in this weekend. So Manchester United will go up against Sunderland. Hopefully, they can grab a win. But honestly, I do not have expectations of the club. So just share your thoughts in the comment section as usual. Do you see Reuben Amorim retaining his position as coach at Manchester United by December, or do you think the club management will finally let him go? Why do you think they are still giving him the opportunity? Is it because of the fact that they do not want to pay the about £12 million that he will be paid as compensation if they eventually let him go? And who do you see becoming the coach at the club? Just drop your thoughts on the comment section. Also comment on Arsenal's performance against Newcastle. Do you see them finally winning the Premier League this season? Yeah, so just share your thoughts on the comment section. Thank you for watching as always. Bye for now.